Hello everyone! How are we doing? Oh, you know what? I forgot. I need to switch to the very peaceful, fireplace. Oh my god, it's Venus! Oh my god! It's Sarah! Hello! Oh, why was I so weird? I was thrown across the screen. Let me make this a little bigger. A little bit smaller. There we go. I know. I threw my ender pearl and I got yoinked across the place. Everyone, since it is beginning of stream, take your sips of water. I'll do it too with you. Room temperature water. I really don't like room temperature water. I always like my water to be nice and cold. Nice and chilled. Icky. Don't say yum. Don't say yum like this is like a good thing, okay? It's not. Don't do that to me. No, it's not good. But I hope everyone's been having a good day. If not, we're gonna be very relaxed, very at peace with ourselves. We are continuing our wonderful read through of Lord of the Rings. For those who may not remember what happened last time, we are at the part of the story where Frodo is taking the ring and has sworn to leave, not sworn, but, you know, he told Gandalf that he is going to be leaving Bag End, and currently he's traveling with Sam and Mary, to like his quote-unquote new house, when that is not the plan. He's not actually going to be living at the new house. I've not been productive at all. This is a great time for you to be productive. It would be a great time to do that now. You could. Absolutely could. Why? I mean, honestly, I can't really judge too much. I also am not super uber productive today. But that's more of just like I have been on League. And, well, let's just say I may have a problem. I don't know if it is or not. Got it. An aspirate open as we speak. Good. Then let's start, shall we? As we last left off. Let me go ahead. It's a bit dark. Fix up this light so I can read a little better. There we go. Okay. And the song ended. And now to bed, sang Pippin in a high voice. Oh, sorry, it was Pippin with them, not Mary. Oopsie. Hush, said Frodo. I think I hear hooves again. They stopped suddenly and stood as silent as the tree shadows, listening. There was a sound of hooves in the lane, some way behind, but coming slow and clear down the wind. Quickly and quietly, they slipped off the path and ran into the deeper shade under the oak trees. Don't let us go too far, said Frodo. I don't want to be seen, but I want to see if it is another Black Rider. Very well, said Pippin, but don't forget the sniffing. The hooves draw nearer. They had no time to find any place better than the general darkness under the trees. Sam and Pippin crouched behind a large tree bole, while Frodo crept behind a few yards towards the lane. It showed gray and pale, a line of fading light through the wood. Above it, The stars were thick in the dim sky, but there was no moon. The sound of hooves stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the lighter space between two trees, and then halt. It looked like the black shade of a horse led by a smaller black shadow. The black shadow stood close to the point where they had left the path, and it swayed from side to side. Frodo thought he heard the sound of snuffling. The shadow bent to the ground, and they began to crawl towards him. Once more, the desire to slip on the ring came over Frodo, but this time it was stronger than before. So strong that almost before he realized what he was doing, his hand was groping in his pocket. But at that moment, there came a sound like mingled song and laughter. Clear voices rose and fell in the starlit air. The black shadow straightened up and retreated. It climbed onto the shadowy horse and seemed to vanish across the lane into the darkness on the other side. Frodo breathed again. "Elves!" exclaimed Sam in a hoarse whisper. "Elves, sir!" He would have burst out of the trees and dashed off towards the voices if they had not pulled him back. "Yes, it is elves," said Frodo. "One can meet them sometime in the woody end. They don't live in the Shire, but they wander it into spring and autumn, out of their own lands, away beyond the Tower Hills. I am thankful that they do. He did not see, but that Black Rider stopped just there and was actually crawling towards us when the song began. As soon as he heard the voices, he slipped away." "What about the elves?" said Sam, too excited to trouble about the rider. "Can't we go see them?" "Listen, they are coming this way," said Frodo. "We have only to wait." The singing drew near. One clear voice rose out now above the others. It was singing in the fair elven tongue, of which Frodo knew only a little, and the others knew nothing. Yet the sound, blending with the melody, seemed to shape itself in their thought into words which only they partially understood. The song, as Frodo heard it, was: Snow White, O Lady clear, O Queen beyond the western seas, O light to us that wander here, amid the world of woven trees. Gilthoniel, O Elbreth, clear are thy eyes and bright thy breath. Snow White, we sing to thee in a far land beyond the sea. O stars that in the sunless year with shining hand by her were sown, in windy fields now bright and clear, we see your silver blossom blown. O Elbreth, Githonliel, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land between the trees, thy starlight on the western seas. The song ended. "These are high elves. They spoke of the name of Elbreth," said Frodo in amazement. "Few of the fairest folk are ever in the Shire. Not many now remain in Middle-earth, east of the Great Sea. This is indeed a strange chance." The hobbit sat in the shadow by the wayside. Before long, the elves came down the lane towards the valley. They passed slowly, and the hobbits could see that the starlight glimmering on their hair and in their eyes. They bore no lights, yet as they walked, a shimmer, like the light of the moon above the rim of the hills before it rises, seemed to fall about their feet. They were now silent. As the last elf passed, he turned to look towards the hobbits and laughed. "Hail, Frodo," he cried. "You are abroad late, or perhaps lost?" Then he called aloud to the others, and all the company stopped and gathered round. "This is indeed wonderful," they said. "3 hobbits in a wood at night. We have not seen such a thing since Bilbo went away. What is the meaning of it?" "The meaning of it, fair people," said Frodo, "is simply that we seem to be going the same way as you are. I like walking under the stars, but I would welcome your company. But we have no need of other company, and hobbits are so dull," they laughed. "And how do you know that we are going the same way as you, where you do not know whether hither You do not know whither we are going. And how do you know my name? Asked Frodo in return. We know many things, they said. We have seen you often before with Bilbo, though you may not have seen us. Who are you? And who is your lord? Asked Frodo. I am Gildor, answered their leader, the elf who had the first hailed him. Gildor Inglorion of the House of Finrod. We are exiles, and most of our kindred have long ago departed, and we too are now only tarrying here a while, ere we return over the great sea. But some of our kinsfolk dwell still in peace in Rivendell. Come now, Frodo, tell us, what are you doing? For we see that there is some shadow of fear upon you. Oh, wise people, interrupted Pippin eagerly, tell us about the Black Riders. Black Riders, they said in low voices. Why do you ask about Black Riders? Because 2 Black Riders have overtaken us today, or one has done so twice, said Pippin. Only a little while ago he slipped away as you drew near. The elves did not answer at once, but spoke rather softly in their own tongue. At length Gildor turned to the hobbits. We will not speak of this here, he said. We think you had best come with us. It is not our custom, but for this time we will take you on our road, and you shall lodge with us tonight, if you will. Oh, fair folk, this is good fortune beyond my hope, said Pippin. Sam was speechless. I thank you, indeed, Gildor Inglorion, said Frodo, bowing. Elen sila lumen. A star shines on the hour of our meeting, he added, in the High Elven speech. Be careful, friends, cried Gildor, laughing. Speak no secrets. Here is a scholar in the ancient tongue. Bilbo was a good master. Hail, elf friend, he said, bowing to Frodo. Come now with your friends and join our company. You had best walk in the middle so that you may not stray. You may be wary before we halt. Why? Where are you going? Asked Frodo. For tonight we go to the woods on the hills above Woodhall. It is some miles, but you shall rest at the end of it, and it will shorten your journey tomorrow. They now marched on again in silence, and passed like shadows and faint lights. For elves, even more than hobbits, could walk when they wished without sound or footfall. Pippin soon began to feel sleepy, and staggered once or twice, but each time a tall elf at his side put his arm out for him and saved him from a fall. Sam walked along Frodo's side, as if in a dream, with an expression on his face half of fear and half of astonished joy. The woods on either side became denser. The trees were now younger and thicker, as the lane went lower, running into the fold of hills. There were many deep breaks of hazel on the rising slopes at either hand. At last the elves turned aside from the path. A green ride lay, almost unseen, through the thickets on the right, and this they followed as it would, way back up the wooded slopes onto the top of the shoulder of the hills that stood out onto the lower land of the river valley. Suddenly, they came out of the shadow of trees, and before them lay a wide space of grass, gray under the night. On 3 sides of the woods pressed upon it, but eastward the ground fell steeply, and the tops were dark trees, growing at the bottom of the slope, or below their feet. Beyond, the low lands lay dim and flat under the stars. Nearer at hand, a few lights twinkled in the village of Woodhall. The elves sat on the grass and spoke together in soft voices. They seemed to take no further notice of the hobbits, and Frodo and his companions wrapped themselves in cloaks and blankets, and drowsiness stole over them. The night grew on, and the lights in the valley went out. Pippin fell asleep, pillowed on a green hillock. Away high in the east swung Remarath, the netted stars, and slowly above the mist of Reg Borgil rose, glowing like a jewel of fire. Then, by some shift of airs, all the mist was drawn away like a veil, and there leaned up, as he climbed over the rim of the world, the swordsman of the sky, Meneglavor, with his shining belt. The elves all burst into song. Suddenly, under the trees, a fire sprang up with a red light. "Come," said the elves called to the hobbits. "Come, now is time for speech and merriment." Pippin sat up, and rubbing his eyes, he shivered. There was a fire in the hall, and food for hungry guests, he said, an elf standing before him. At the south end of the greensward there was an opening. There the green floor ran on the wood and formed a wide space like a hall, roofed by the burrow of trees. There great trunks ran like pillars down each side. In the middle there was a wood fire blazing. Upon the tree pillars torches with lights of gold and silver were burning steadily. The elves sat round the fire upon the grass or upon the sawn rings of old trunks. Some went to and fro, bearing cups and pouring drink. Others brought food on heaped plates and dishes. "This is poor fare," they said to the hobbits, "for we are lodging in the greenwood far from our halls. If you are our guests at home, we will treat you better." "It seems to me good enough for a birthday party," said Frodo. Pippin afterwards recalled little of either food or drink, for his mind was filled with the light upon the elf faces and the sound of voices so various and so beautiful that he felt in a walking dream. But he remembered that there was bread, surpassing the savor of a fair white loaf to one who was starving, and fruits as sweet as wild berries and richer than the tended fruits of gardens. He drained a cup that was filled with fragrant draught, cool as a clear fountain, golden as a summer afternoon. Sam could never describe in words nor picture clearly to himself what he felt or thought that night, though it remained in his memory as one of the chief events of his life. Nearest he ever got was to say, "Well, sir, if I could grow apples like that, I would call myself a gardener." But it was the singing that went to my heart, if you know what I mean. Frodo sat, eating, drinking, and talking with delight, but his mind was chiefly on the words spoken. He knew a little of elf speech and listened eagerly. Now again, he spoke to those that served him and thanked them in their own language. They smiled at him and said, laughing, "Here is a jewel among the hobbits." After a while, Pippin fell fast asleep and was lifted up and borne away to bower under the trees. There he was laid upon a soft bed and slept the rest of the night away. Sam refused to leave his master. When Pippin had gone, he came and sat curled up at Frodo's feet, where at last he nodded and closed his eyes. Frodo remained long awake, talking with Gildor. They spoke of many things, new and old, and Frodo questioned Gildor much about the happenings in the wide world outside the Shire. The tidings were mostly sad and ominous of gathering darkness, the wars of men, and the flight of elves. At last, Frodo asked the question that was nearest to his heart. "Tell me, Gildor, have you ever seen Bilbo since he had left us?" Gildor smiled. "Yes," he answered, "twice. He said farewell to us on this very spot, but I saw him once again, far from here. He would say no more about Bilbo, and Frodo went silent." "You do not ask me or tell me much that concerns yourself, Frodo," said Gildor, "but I already know a little, and can read more in your face and in the thought behind your questions. You are leaving the Shire, and yet you doubt that you will find what you seek, or accomplish what you intend, or that you will ever return. Is that so?" "It is," said Frodo. "But I thought my going was a secret known to only Gandalf and my faithful Sam." He looked down at Sam, who was snoring gently. "The secret will not reach the enemy from us," said Gildor. "The enemy?" said Frodo. Then you know why I am leaving the Shire? I do not know for what reason the enemy is pursuing you, answered Gildor, but I perceive that he is, strange indeed though that seems to me, and I warn you that the peril is now both before you and behind you, and upon either side. You mean the riders? I feared that they were servants of the enemy. What are the Black Riders? Has Gandalf told you nothing? Nothing of such creatures. Then I think it is not for me to say more, lest terror should keep you from your journey, for it seems to me that you have set out just only in time, if indeed you are in time. You must now make haste, and neither stay nor turn back, for the Shire is no longer any protection to you. I cannot imagine what information could be more terrifying than your hints and warnings, exclaimed Frodo. I knew that the danger lay ahead, of course, but I did not expect to meet it in our own Shire. Can't a hobbit walk from the water to the river in peace? But it is not your own Shire, said Gildor. Others dwelt here before hobbits were, and others will dwell here again when hobbits are no more. The wide world is all about you. You can fence yourselves in, but you cannot forever fence it out. I know, and yet it has always seemed so safe and familiar. What can I do now? My plan was to leave the Shire secretly and make my way to Rivendell, but now my footsteps are dogged before I can get to Buckland. I think you should still follow that plan, said Gildor. I do not think the road will prove too hard for your courage. But if you desire clearer counsel, you should ask Gandalf. I do not know the reason for your flight, and therefore I do not know by what your pursuers will assail you. These things Gandalf must know. I suppose that you will see him before you leave the Shire? I hope so. But that is another thing that makes me anxious. I have been expecting Gandalf for many days. He was to have come to Hobbiton at the latest 2 nights ago, but he has never appeared. Now I am wondering what can have happened. Should I wait for him? Gildor was silent for a moment. I do not like this news, he said at last. That Gandalf should be late does not bode well. But it is said, do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. The choice is yours, to go or wait. It is also said, answered Frodo, do not go to the elves for counsel, for they will say both no and yes. Is it indeed? Laughed Gildor. Elves seldom give unguarded advice, for advice is a dangerous gift, even from the wise to the wise, and all courses may run ill. But what would you? You have not told me all concerning yourself, and how then shall I choose to better than you? But if you demand advice, I will for friendship's sake give it. I think you should go now, at once, without delay, and if Gandalf does not come before you set out, then I also advise, do not go alone. Take such friends as are trusty and willing. Now, should you be grateful, for I do not give this counsel gladly, the elves have their own labors and their own sorrows, and they are little concerned with the ways of hobbits or of any other creature upon earth. Our paths cross theirs seldom by chance or purpose. In this meeting, there may be more than chance, but the purpose is not clear to me, and I fear to say too much. I am deeply grateful, said Frodo, but I wish you would tell me plainly what the Black Riders are. If I take your advice, I may not see Gandalf for a long while, and I ought to know. What is the danger that pursues me? It is not enough to know that they are servants of the enemy, answered Gildor. Flee them. Speak no words to them. They are deadly. Ask no more of me. But my heart forebodes that, ere all is ended, you, Frodo, son of Drogo, Who will know more of these fell things than Gildor Ingloron? May Elebreth protect you. But where shall I find courage? Asked Frodo. That is what I chiefly need. Courage is found in unlikely places, said Gildor. Be of good hope. Sleep now. In the morning we shall have gone, but we will send our messages through the lands. The wandering companies shall know of your journey, and those that have power for good shall be on the watch. I name you, elf friend, and may the stars shine upon the end of your own road. Seldom have we had such delight in strangers, and it is fair to hear words of the ancient speech from the lips of other wanderers in the world. Frodo felt sleep come upon him, even as Gildor finished speaking. I will sleep now, he said, and the elf led him to a bower beside Pippin, and he threw himself upon a bed and fell once into a deep, dreamless slumber. Chapter 4. A short cut to mushrooms. In the morning, Frodo woke refreshed. He was lying in a bower made by a living tree with branches laced and drooping to the ground. His bed was of fern and grass, deep and soft and strangely fragrant. The sun was shining through the fluttering leaves, which were still green upon the tree. He jumped up and went out. Sam was sitting on the grass near the edge of the wood. Pippin was standing, studying the sky and the weather. There was no sign of the elves. They have left us food and drink and bread, said Pippin. Come and have your breakfast. The bread tastes almost as good as it did last night. I did not want to leave you any, but Sam insisted. Frodo sat down beside Sam and began to eat. What is the plan for today? Asked Pippin. To walk to Buckleberry as quickly as possible, answered Frodo, and gave his attention to the food. Do you think we shall see anything of those riders? Asked Pippin cheerfully. Under the morning sun, the prospect of seeing a whole troop of them did not seem very alarming to him. Yes, probably, said Frodo, not liking the reminder, but I hope to get across the river without seeing this. Did you find out anything about them from Gildor? Not much, only hints and riddles, said Frodo evasively. Did you ask about the sniffing? We didn't discuss it, said Frodo with his mouth full. You should have. I'm sure it was very important. In that case, I'm sure Gildor would have refused to explain it, said Frodo sharply. And now leave me in peace for a bit. I don't want to answer a string of questions while I'm eating. I want to think. Good heavens, said Pippin. At breakfast. He walked away towards the edge of the green. From Frodo's mind, the bright morning, treacherously bright, he thought, had not banished the fear of pursuit. He pondered the words of Gildor. The merry voice of Pippin came to him. He was running on the green turf and singing. No, I could not, he said to himself. It is one thing to take my young friends walking over the Shire with me until we are hungry and weary, and the food and bed are sweet. To take them into exile, where hunger and weariness may have no cure, is quite another. Even if they are willing to come. The inheritance is mine alone. I don't think I ought to take Sam. He looked at Sam Gamgee and discovered that Sam was watching him. Well, Sam, he said, what about it? I am leaving the Shire as soon as ever I can. In fact, I have made up my mind now not to even wait a day at Cricket Hollow, if it can be helped. Very good, sir. You still mean to come with me? I do. It is going to be very dangerous, Sam. It is already dangerous. Most likely neither of us will come back. If you don't come back, sir, then I shan't, that's certain, said Sam. Don't you leave me, they said to me. Leave him, I said. I never mean to. I am going with him. If he climbs to the moon, and if any of those black riders try to stop him, they'll have Sam Gamgee to reckon with, I said. They laughed. Who are they? And what are you talking about? The elves, sir. We had some talk last night, and they seemed to know you were going away, so I didn't see the use of denying it. Wonderful folk, elves, sir, wonderful." "They are," said Frodo. "Do you like them still, now that you have a closer view?" "They seem a bit above my likes and dislikes, so to speak," answered Sam slowly. "It don't seem matter what I think about them. They are quite different, and from what I expect, so old and young, and so gay and sad, as it were." Frodo looked at Sam rather startled, half expecting to see some outward sign of the odd change that seemed to have come over him. It did not sound like the voice of the old Sam Gamgee that he thought he knew, but it looked like the old Sam Gamgee sitting there, except that his face was unusually thoughtful. "Do you feel any need to leave the Shire now that your wish to see them has come true already?" "Yes, sir. I don't know how to say it, but after last night, I feel different. I seem to see ahead in kind of a way. I know we are going to take a long road into darkness, but I know I can't turn back. It isn't to see elves now, nor dragons, nor mountains that I want. I don't rightly know what I want, but I have something to do before the end, and it lies ahead, not in the Shire. I must see it through, sir, if you understand me." "I don't altogether, but I understand that Gandalf chose me a good companion. I am content. We shall go together." Frodo finished his breakfast in silence. Then, standing up, he looked over at the land ahead and called to Pippin. "All ready to start?" he said, as Pippin ran up. "We must be getting off at once. We slept late, and there are a good many miles to go." "You slept late, you mean," said Pippin. "I was up long before, and we are only waiting for you to finish eating and thinking." "I have finished both now, and I'm going to make for Buckleberry Ferry as quickly as possible. I am not going out of the way back onto the road we left last night. I'm going to cut straight across the country from here." "Then you are going to fly," said Pippin. "You won't cut straight on foot anywhere in this country." "We can cut straighter than a road anyway," answered Frodo. "The ferry is east from Woodhall, but the hard road curves away to the left. You can see a bend of it away north over there. It goes round the north end of Marsh, as so to strike the causeway from the bridge above Stock. But that is miles out from the way. We could save a quarter of the distance if we made a line for the ferry from where we stand." "Shortcuts make long the days," argued Pippin. "The country is rough round here. There are bogs and all kinds of difficulties down in Marsh, and the land I know in these parts. If you are worrying about the Black Riders, I can't see that it is any worse meeting them on the road than is in a wood or a field." Answered, hold on. "It is less easy to find people in the woods and fields," answered Frodo. "And if you are supposed to be on the road, there are some chance that you will be looked for on the road, and not off it." "All right," said Pippin. "I will follow you into every bog and ditch, but it is hard. I had counted on passing the Golden Perch at Stock before sundown, the best beer in East Farthing, or used to be. It is a long time since I tasted it." "Then that settles it," said Frodo. "Shortcuts make delays, but inns make longer ones. At all costs, we must keep you away from the Golden Perch. We want to get to Buckleberry before dark. What do you say, Sam?" "I will go with you, Mr. Frodo," said Sam, in spite of private misgiving and deep regret for the best spear in East Farthing. "Then, if we are going to toil through bog and briar, let's go now," said Pippin. It was already nearly as hot as it had been the day before, but clouds were beginning to come up from the west. It looked likely to turn to rain. The hobbits scrambled down a steep green bank and plunged into the thick trees below. Their course had been chosen to leave Woodhall to their left, and to cut slanting through the woods that clustered along the eastern side of the hills, until they reached the flats beyond. Then they could make straight for the ferry over the country that was open, except for a few ditches and fences. Frodo reckoned they had 18 miles to go in a straight line. He soon found that the thicket was closer and more tangled than it had appeared. There were no paths in the undergrowth, and they did not get on very fast. When they had struggled to the bottom of the bank, they found a stream running down from the hills behind a deeply dug bed with steep, slippery sides overhung with brambles. Most conveniently, it cut across the line they had chosen. They could not jump over it, nor indeed get across it at all without getting wet, scratched, and muddy. They halted, wondering what to do. "First check," said Pippin, smiling grimly. Sam Gamgee looked back. Through an opening in the trees, he caught a glimpse of the top of the green bank from which they had climbed down. "Look," he said, clutching Frodo by the arm. They all looked, and on the edge high above them they saw the sky a horse standing. Beside it stooped a black figure. They at once gave up any idea of going back. Frodo led the way and plunged quickly into the thick bushes beside the stream. "Whew," he said to Pippin. "We were both right. The shortcut has gone crooked already, but we got under cover just only in time. You've got sharp ears, Sam. Can you hear anything coming?" They stood still, almost holding their breath as they listened. But there was no sound of pursuit. "I don't fancy he would try bringing his horse down the bank," said Sam. "But I guess he knows we came down it. We had better get going." Going on was not altogether easy. They had packs to carry, and the bushes and brambles were reluctant to let them through. They were cut off from the wind by the ridge behind, and the air was still and stuffy. When they were forced their way at last into more open ground, they were hot and tired and very scratched, and they were also no longer certain of the direction in which they were going. The banks of the stream sank as they reached the levels and became broader and shallower, wandering off towards Marish and the river. "Why, this is the Stockbrook," said Pippin. "If we are going to try and get back onto our course, we must cross at once and bear right." They waded the stream and hurried over a wide open space, rush-grown and treeless, on the farther side. Beyond that, they came again to a belt of trees, tall oaks for the most part, with here and there an elm tree or an ash. The ground was fairly level, and there was a little undergrowth, but the trees were too close for them to see far ahead. The leaves blew upwards, and sudden gusts of wind and spots of rain began to fall the overcast sky. Then the wind died away, and the rain came streaming down. They trudged along as fast as they could, over patches of grass, and through thick drifts of old leaves, and all about them the rain pattered and trickled. They did not talk, but kept glancing back and from side to side. After half an hour, Pippin said, "I hope we have not turned too much towards the south and not walking alongside through this wood. It is not a very broad belt. I should have said no more than a mile at the widest, and we ought to have been through it by now." "It is no good our starting to go in zigzags," said Frodo. "That won't mend matters. Let us keep going as we are. I am not sure I want to come out into the open yet." They went on for perhaps another couple of miles. Then the sun gleamed out of ragged clouds, and the rain lessened. It was now past midday, and they felt it was high time for lunch. They halted under an elm tree. Its leaves, though fast turning yellow, were still thick, and the ground at its feet was fairly dry and sheltered. When they had come to make their meal, they found that the elves had filled their bottles with a clear drink, pale golden in color. It had the scent of a honey made of many flowers, and it was wonderfully refreshing. Very soon they were laughing and snapping their fingers at the rain and at black riders. The last few miles, they felt, would soon be behind them. Frodo propped his back up against the tree trunk and closed his eyes. Sam and Pippin sat near, and they began to hum, and then to sing softly. Ho, 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 to the bottle I go, to heal my heart and drown my woe. Rain may fall and wind may blow, and many miles be still to go, but under a tree I will lie, and let the clouds go sailing by. Ho, 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 they began, again louder. They stopped short suddenly. Frodo sprang to his feet. A long, drawn wail came down the wind, like a cry of some evil and lonely creature. It rose and fell and ended on a high, piercing note. Even as they sat and stood, and as if suddenly frozen, it was answered by another cry, fainter and further off, but no less chilling to the blood. There was then a silence, broken only by the sound of wind in the leaves. "And what do you think that was?" Pippin asked at last, trying to speak lightly, but quavering a little. "If it was a bird, it was one that I've never heard before in the Shire." "It was not a bird or beast," said Frodo. "It was a call, or a signal. There were no words in that cry, though I could not catch them, but no hobbit has heard such a voice." No more was said about it. They were all thinking of the riders, but no one spoke of them. They were now reluctant either to stay out or go on, but sooner or later they had got to get across the open country to the ferry, and it was best to go sooner and in daylight. In a few moments they had shouldered their packs and again were off. Before long the wood came to a sudden end. Wide grassland stretched before them. Now they saw that they had, in fact, turned too much to the south. Way over the flats, they caught a glimpse of the low hill of Buckleberry across the river, but it was now to their left. Creeping cautiously out from the edge of the trees, they set off across the open as quickly as they could. At first, they felt afraid, away from the shelter of the wood. Far back behind them stood the high place where they had breakfast. Frodo half expected to see the small, distant figure of a horseman on the ridge dark against the sky, but there was no sign of one. The sun, escaping from the breaking clouds as it sank towards the hills they had left, was now shining brightly again. Their fear left them, though they still felt uneasy, but the land became steadily more tame and well-ordered. Soon they came into the well-tended fields and meadows. There were hedges and gates and dikes for drainage. Everything seemed quiet and peaceful, just an ordinary corner of the Shire. Their spirits rose with every step. The line of the river grew near, and the black riders began to seem like phantoms of the woods now left far behind. They passed along the edge of the huge turnip field and came to a stout gate. Beyond it, a ruddled lane ran between low, well-laid hedges towards a distant clump of trees. Pippin stopped. "I know these fields and this gate. This is Bamfurlong, old Farmer Maggot's land. That's his farm way there in the trees." "One trouble after another," said Frodo, looking nearly as much alarmed as if Pippin had declared the lane was a slot leading into a dragon's den. The others looked at him in surprise. "What's wrong with old Maggot?" asked Pippin. "He's a good friend to all the Brandybucks. Of course he's a terror to trespassers and keeps ferocious dogs, but after all, folk down here are near the border and have to be more on their guard." "I know," said Frodo, "but all the same," he added with a shamefaced laugh, "I am terrified of him and his dogs. I have avoided his farm for years and years. He caught me several times trespassing after mushrooms when I was a youngster at Brandy Hall. On the last occasion, he beat me and then took me and showed me to his dogs. 'See, lads,' he said, 'next time this young varmint sets foot on my land, you can eat him. Now see him off.' They chased me all the way to the ferry. I've never got over the fright. Though I dare say the beasts knew their business, it would not really have touched me." Pippin laughed. "Well, it is time you made it up, especially if you are coming back to live in Buckland. Old Maggot is really a stout fellow, if you leave his mushrooms alone." Let's get into the lane, and then we shan't be trespassing. If we meet him, I'll do the talking. He's an old friend of Mary's, and I used to come here with him a good deal at one time. They went along the lane until they saw the thatched roofs of a large house and farm buildings peeping out of among the trees ahead. The maggots and the puttyfooks of stock, and most of the inhabitants of the marsh were house dwellers, and this farm was stoutly built of brick and had a high wall all around it. There was a wide wooden gate opening out of the wall into the lane. Suddenly, as they drew near, a terrific baying and barking broke out, and a loud voice was heard shouting, "Grip! Fang! Wolf! Come on, lads!" Frodo and Sam stopped dead, but Pippin walked on a few paces. The gate opened, and 3 huge dogs came pelting out into the lane, and had dashed towards the travelers, barking fiercely. They took no notice of Pippin, but Sam shrank against the wall while 2 wolvish-looking dogs sniffed at him suspiciously, and snarled if he moved. The largest and most ferocious of the 3 halted in front of Frodo, bristling and growling. Through the gate there now appeared a broad, thick-set hobbit with a round, red face. "Hello, hello! And who may you be? And what may you be wanting?" he asked. "Good afternoon, Mr. Maggot," said Pippin. The farmer looked at him closely. "Well, if it isn't Master Pippin, Mr. Peregrine Took, I should say," he cried, changing from a scowl to a grin. "It is a long time since I saw you round here. It's lucky for you that I know you. I was just going out to set my dogs on any strangers. There are some funny things going on today. Of course, we do get queer folk wandering around these parts at times, too near the river," he said, shaking his head. "But this fellow was the most outlandish I have ever set my eyes on. He won't cross my land without leaving a second time. Not if I can stop it." "What fellow do you mean?" asked Pippin. "Then you haven't seen him?" said the farmer. "He went up the lane towards the causeway not long while back. He was a funny customer, and asking funny questions. But perhaps you'll come along inside, and we'll pass the news more comfortable. I have a drop of good ale on tap, if you and your friends are willing, Mr. Took." It seemed plain that the farmer would tell them more, if allowed to do in his own time and fashion, so they all accepted the invitation. "What about the dogs?" asked Frodo anxiously. The farmer laughed. "They won't harm you, not unless I tell them to. Here, Grip, Fang, Heel," he cried. "Heel, Wolf." To the relief of Frodo and Sam, the dogs walked away and let them go free. Pippin introduced the other 2 to the farmer. "Mr. Frodo Baggins," he said. "You may not remember him, but he used to live at Brandy Hall." At the name of Baggins, the farmer started and gave Frodo a sharp glance. For a moment, Frodo thought that the memory of the stolen mushrooms had been aroused, and that the dogs would be told to see him off. But Farmer Maggot took him by the arm. "Well, if that isn't queerer than ever," he exclaimed. "Mr. Baggins, is it? Come inside. We must have a talk." They went to the farmer's kitchen and sat by the wide fireplace. Mrs. Maggot brought out beer in a huge jug and filled 4 large mugs. It was a good brew, and Pippin found himself more than compensated for missing the golden perch. Sam sipped his beer suspiciously. He had a natural mistrust in the inhabitants of other parts of the Shire, and also he was not disposed to be quick friends with anyone who had beaten his master, however long ago. After a few remarks about the weather and the agricultural prospects, which were no worse than usual, Farmer Maggot put down his mug and looked at them all in turn. "Now, Mr. Peregrine," he said, "where might you be coming from, and where might you be going to? Were you coming to visit me? For if so, you had gone past my gate without my seeing you." Well, no, answered Pippin. To tell you the truth, since you had guessed it, we got into the lane from the other end. We had come over your fields, but that was quite by accident. We lost our way in the woods, back near Woodhall, and trying to take a shortcut to the ferry. If you were in a hurry, the road would have served you better, said the farmer. But I wasn't worrying about that. You have leave to walk over my land if you have a mind, Mr. Peregrine, and you, Mr. Baggins, though I dare say you still like mushrooms, he laughed. Ah, yes, I recognize that name. I recollect the time of when a young Frodo Baggins was one of the worst young rascals of Buckland, but it wasn't mushrooms that I was thinking of. I just heard the name Baggins before you turned up. What do you think that funny customer asked me? They waited anxiously for him to go on. Well, the farmer continued, approaching his point with slow relish. He came riding on a big black horse in at the gate, which happened to be open and right up to my door. All black he was himself too, and now cloaked and hooded up as if he did not want to be known. Now what in the Shire can he want? I thought to myself. We don't ever see many of the big folk over the border, and anyway, I have never heard of any like this black fellow. Good day to you, I says, going out to him. This lane don't lead anywhere, and wherever you may be going, your quickest way will be back on the road. I didn't like the looks of him, and when his grip came out, he took one sniff and let a yelp as if he had been stung. He put down his tail and bolted off howling. The black fellow sat quite still. I come from yonder, he said, slow and stiff-like, pointing back west over my fields, if you please. Have you seen Baggins? He asked in a queer voice, and had bent down towards me. Could not see any face, for his hood fell down so low, and I felt a sort of shiver down my back. But I did not see why he should come riding over my land so bold. Be off, I said. There are no Bagginses here. You are in the wrong part of the Shire. You had better go back west to Hobbiton, but you can go by the road this time. Baggins has left, he answered in a whisper. He is coming. He is not far away. I wish to find him. If he passes, will you tell him? Will you tell me? I will come back with gold. No, you won't, I said. You'll go back to where you belong double quick. I will give you 1 minute before I call all my dogs. He gave a sort of hiss. It might have been laughing, it might have not. Then he spurred his great horse right at me. I jumped out of the way only just in time, and I called the dogs, but he swung off and rode through the gate and up the lane towards the causeway like a bolt of thunder. What do you think of that? Frodo sat for a moment, looking at the fire, but his only thought was how on earth would they reach the ferry? I don't know what to think, he said at last. Then I'll tell you what to think, said Maggot. You should have never gone mixing yourself up with Hobbiton folk, Mr. Frodo. Folk are queer up there. Sam stirred in his chair and looked at the farmer with an unfriendly eye. But you were always reckless, lad. When I heard you had left Brandybucks and have gone off to that old Mr. Bilbo, I said that you were going to find trouble. Mark my words, this all comes from those strange doings of Mr. Bilbo's. His money was in some strange fashion in foreign parts, they say. Maybe there is some that they want to know what has become of the gold and jewels he had buried in the hill of Hobbiton, as I hear. Frodo said nothing. The shrewd guesses of the farmer were rather disconcerting. Well, Mr. Frodo, Maggot went on, I'm glad that you've had a sense to come back to Buckland. My advice is, stay there, and don't get mixed up with all these outlandish folk. You have friends in these parts, and if any of these black fellows come after you again, I'll deal with them. I'll say you're dead, or have left the Shire, or anything you like. That might be true enough, for as like as not, it is old Mr. Bilbo they want news of. Maybe you're right, said Frodo, avoiding the farmer's eye and staring at the fire. Maggot looked at him thoughtfully. Well, I see you have ideas of your own, he said. It is as plain as my nose that no accident brought you and that rider here on the same afternoon, and maybe my news was no great news to you, after all. I am not asking you to tell me anything you have a mind to keep as yourself, but I see you are in some kind of trouble. Perhaps you are thinking it won't be too easy to get to the ferry without being caught? I was thinking so, said Frodo. But we have got to try and get there, and it won't be done by sitting and thinking. So I'm afraid we must be going. Thank you very much indeed of your kindness. I have been in terror of you and your dogs for over 30 years, Farmer Maggot, though you may have laughed and hear it. It is a pity, for I've missed a good friend, and now I'm sorry to leave so soon, but I'll come back, perhaps one day, if I get a chance. You'll be welcome when you come, said Maggot. But now I've got a notion. It's near sundown already, and we're going to have our supper, for we mostly go to bed soon after the sun. If you and Mr. Peregrine and all could stay and have a bite with us, we would be blessed. And so should we, said Frodo. But we must be going at once, I'm afraid. Even now, it will be dark before we can reach the ferry. Ah, but 1 minute. I was gonna say, after a bit of supper, I'll get out a small wagon, and I'll drive you to the ferry. That'll save you a good step, and it might also save you the trouble of another sort. Frodo now accepted the invitation gratefully, to the relief of Pippin and Sam. The sun was already setting behind the western hills, and the light was failing. 2 of the Maggot's sons and 3 daughters came in, and a generous supper was laid on the large table. The kitchen was lit with candles, and the fire was mended. Mrs. Maggot bustled in and out. 1 or 2 other hobbits belonging to the farm household came in. In a short while, 14 sat down to eat. There was beer in plenty, and a mighty dish of mushrooms and bacon, besides much other solid farmhouse fare. The dogs lay by the fire and gnawed minds and racked bones. When they had finished, the farmer and his sons went out with a lantern and got the wagon ready. It was dark in the yard when the guests came out. They threw their packs on board and climbed in. The farmer sat in the driving seat and whipped up 2 stout ponies. His wife stood in the light of the open door. You be careful yourself, Maggot, she called. Don't go arguing with any foreigners, and come straight back. I will, said he, and drove out the gate. There was now no breath of wind stirring. The night was still and quiet, and a chill was in the air. They went out without lights, and took it slowly. After a mile or 2, the lane came to an end, crossing a deep dike, and climbing to a short slope up on the high-banked causeway. Maggot got down and took a good look either way, north and south, but nothing could be seen in the darkness, and there was not a sound in the air. Thin strands of river mist were hanging above the dikes and crawling over the fields. It's going to be thick, said Maggot, but I'll not light my lantern till I turn for home. We'll hear anything on the road long before we meet it tonight. It was 5 miles or more from Maggot's Lane to ferry. The hobbits wrapped themselves up, but their ears were strained for any sound above the creak of wheels and the slow clop of the ponies' hooves. The wagon seemed slower than a snail to Frodo. Besides him, Pippin was nodding towards sleep, but Sam was staring forwards in the rising fog. They reached the entrance to the ferry lane at last. It was marked by 2 tall white posts that suddenly loomed up on their right. Farmer Maggot drew in his ponies and the wagon and creaked to a halt. They were just beginning to scramble out, when suddenly they heard what they had been dreading. Hooves on the road ahead. The sound was coming towards them. Maggot jumped down and stood, holding the pony's leads and peering forward in the gloom. Clip, clop, clip, clop came approaching the rider. All the fall of hooves sounded loud in the still, foggy air. You better be hidden, Mr. Frodo, said Sam anxiously. You get down in the wagon and cover up with blankets, and we'll send this rider to the right-abouts. He climbed out and went to the farmer's side. Black riders would have had to ride him over to get near the wagon. Clip, clop, clip, clop. The rider was nearly on them. Hello there, called Farmer Maggot. The advancing hooves stopped short. They thought they could dimly guess a dark cloak shape in the mist, a yard or two ahead. Now then, said the farmer, throwing the reins to Sam and striding forward. Don't you come a step nearer. What do you want? And where are you going? So sorry. I want Mr. Baggins. Have you seen him? Said a muffled voice. But the voice was the voice of Mary Brandybuck. A dark lantern was uncovered, and the light fell on a astonished face of the farmer. Mr. Mary, he cried. Yes, of course. Who did you think it was? Said Mary, coming forward, as he came out of the mist, and their fears subsided. He seemed suddenly to diminish to the ordinary hobbit size. He was riding a pony, and his scarf was swathed around his neck and over his chin to keep out the fog. Frodo sprang out from the wagon to greet him. So there you are at last, said Mary. I was beginning to wonder if you would turn up at all today, and I was going just back to get supper. When it grew foggy, I came across and rode up towards the stock to see if you had fallen in any ditches, but I am blessed if I know which way you had come. Where did you find them, Mr. Maggot? In your duck pond? No. I caught them trespassing, said the farmer, and nearly set my dogs on them. But they'll tell you all the story, I've no doubt. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Mary and Mr. Frodo and all, I best be turning for home. Mrs. Maggot will be worrying with night getting thick. He backed the wagon into the lane and turned it. Well, good night to you all, he said. It's been a queer day and no mistake, but all's well as ends well, though perhaps we should not say that until we reach our own doors. I'll not deny that I'll be glad now when I do. He lit his lanterns and got up. Suddenly, he produced a large basket from under the seat. I was nearly forgetting, he said. Mrs. Maggot set this up for Mr. Baggins with her compliments. He handed it down and moved off, followed by a chorus of thanks and good nights. They watched as the pale rings of light round his lanterns as they dwindled into the foggy night. Suddenly, Frodo laughed. From the covered basket he held, the scent of mushrooms was rising. Chapter 5. Conspiracy Unmasked. Now we had better get ourselves home, said Mary. There's something funny about all this, I see, but it must wait till we get in. They turned down the fairy lane, which was straight and well kept, and edged with a large white wash stone. In hundreds of yards or so, it brought them to the riverbank, where there was a broad, wooden landing stage. A large, flat ferry boat was moored beside it. The white bollards near the water's edge glimmered in the light of the 2 lamps on high posts. Behind them was the mist of the flat fields, were now above the hedges. But the water before them was dark, with only a few curling wisps like steam among the reeds by the bank. There seemed to be less fog in the further side. Mary led the pony over the gangway onto the ferry, and the others followed. Mary then pushed off slowly with a long pole. The Brandywine followed slow and the broad before them. On the other side of the bank was steep, and up it was a winding path climbed from the further landing. Lamps were twinkling there. Behind loomed up the Buck Hill, and out of it, though stray shrouds of mist, shone many round windows, yellow and red. They were the windows of Brandy Hall, the ancient home of the Brandybucks. Long ago, Gorhendad Oldbuck, the head of the Oldbuck family, was one of the oldest in the marsh, or indeed in the Shire, had crossed the river, which was the original boundary of the land eastwards. He built and excavated Brandy Hall, changed his name to Brandybuck, and settled down to become master of what was virtually a small independent country. His family grew and grew, and after his days continued to grow, until Brandy Hall occupied the whole of the low hill and had 3 large front doors, many side doors, and about 100 windows. The Brandybucks and their numerous dependents began to burrow and later to build all round about. That was the origin of Buckland, a thickly inhabited strip between the river and the old forests, a sort of colony from the Shire. Its chief village was Bucklebury, clustering in the banks and slopes behind Brandy Hall. The people in the marsh were friendly with the Bucklanders, and the authority of the master of the hall, as the head of the Brandybuck family was called, was still acknowledged by the farmers between Stock and Rushy, but most of the folk of the old shire regarded the Bucklanders as peculiar, half foreigners as it were, though, as a matter of fact, they were not very different from the other hobbits of the Four Farthings, except in one point. They were fond of boats, and some of them could swim. Their land was originally unprotected from the east, but on that side they had begun to build a hedge, high hay. It had been planted many generations ago, and now was a thick and tall, for it was constantly tended. It ran all the way from Brandywine Bridge in a big loop, curving away from the river, to Haysend, where the Withy Wind flowed from the forest into the Brandywine. Well over 20 miles from end to end, but of course it was not a complete protection. The forest grew close to the hedge in many places, and the Bucklanders kept their doors locked after dark. And that also was not unusual in the Shire. The ferry boat moved slowly across the water. The Buckland shore drew nearer. Sam was the only member of the party who had not been over the river before. He had a strange feeling as the slow, gurgling stream slipped by. His old life lay behind in the mists. The dark adventure lay in front. He scratched his head, and for a moment he had a passing wish that Mr. Frodo could have gone on living quietly in Bag End. The 4 hobbits stepped off the ferry. Merry was tying it up, and Pippin was already leading the pony up the path, when Sam, who had been looking back as if to take farewell of the Shire, said in a hoarse whisper, "Look back, Mr. Frodo. Do you see anything?" On the far stage, under the distant lamps, they could just make out a figure. It looked like a dark, black bundle left behind. But as they looked at it, it seemed to move and sway in this way and that, as if searching the ground. And it crawled, or went crouching, back into the gloom beyond the lamps. "What in the Shire is that?" exclaimed Merry. "Something that is following us," said Frodo. "But don't ask any more now. Let's get away at once." They hurried back up the path, up to the top of the bank, but when they looked back to the far shore, it was shrouded in mist. "The west bank," said Frodo. "Can horses cross the river?" "They can go 20 miles north to Brandywine Bridge, or they might swim," answered Merry, "though I had never heard of such any horse swimming in Brandywine. But what have horses to do with it?" "I'll tell you later. Let's get indoors, and then we can talk." "All right. You and Pippin know your way, so I'll just ride on and tell Fatty Bolger that you're coming. We'll see about supper and things." "We had our supper early with Farmer Maggot," said Frodo, "but we could do with another." "You shall have it. Give me that basket," said Merry, and rode ahead into the darkness. It was some distance from the Brandywine to Frodo's new house at Cricket Hollow. They passed Buck Hill and Brandy Hall on their left, and on the outskirts of Bucklebury struck the main road of Buckland that ran from the bridge. Half a mile northward along this way, they came to a lane opening on their right. This they followed for a couple miles as they climbed up and down the country. At last, they came to a narrow gate in a thick hedge. Nothing could be seen out of the house in the dark, It stood back from the lane in the middle of the wide circle of lawns surrounding by a belt of low trees inside the outer hedge. Frodo had chosen it because it stood out in an out-of-the-way corner of the country, and there were no other dwellings close by. You could get in and out without being noticed. It had been built a long while before the Brandybucks for the use of guests or members of the family that had wished to escape from the crowd life of Brandy Hall. For a time, it was an old-fashioned countrified house, as much like a hobbit hole as possible. It was long and low, with no upper story. It had a roof of turf, round windows, and a large round door. As they walked up the green path from the gate, no light was visible. The windows were dark and shuttered. Frodo knocked on the door, and Fatty Bulger opened it. A friendly light streamed out. They slipped in quietly and shut themselves in the light. Inside, they were in a wide hall with doors on either side, and in front of them was a passage ran back down the middle of the house. "Well, what do you think of it?" asked Mary, coming up the passage. "We have done our best in a short time to make it look like home. After all, Fatty and I only got here with the last cartload yesterday." Frodo looked round. It did look like home. Many of his own favorite things, or Bilbo's things, they reminded him sharply of him in their new setting, were arranged as neatly as possible, as they had been at Bag End. It was a pleasant, comfortable, welcoming place, and he found himself wishing that he had... Oh my goodness, I lost my place. That he was really coming here to settle down in the quiet retirement. It seemed unfair to have put his friends through all this trouble, and he wondered again how he was going to break the news to them that he must leave them so soon. Indeed, at once. Yet that would have to be done that very night, before they all went to bed. "It's delightful," he said, with an effort. "I hardly feel that I have moved at all." The travelers hung up their coats and piled their packs on the floor. Mary led them down the passage and threw open a door at the far end. Firelight came out in a puff of steam. "A bath!" cried Pippin. "Oh, blessed Meriadoc!" "Which order shall we go in?" said Frodo. "Eldest first, or quickest first? You'll be last either way, Master Peregrine." "Trust me to arrange the things better than that," said Mary. "We can't begin life at Cricket Hollow with a quarrel over baths. In that room there are 3 tubs, and a copper full of boiling water. There are also towels, mats, and soap. Get inside and be quick." Mary and Fatty went into the kitchen on the other side of the passage and busied themselves with final preparations for a late supper. Snatches of competing songs came up from the bathroom, mixed with the sound of splashing and wallowing. The voice of Pippin was suddenly lifted up by the others in one of Bilbo's favorite bath songs. "Sing hey for the bath at close of day, that washes the weary mud away. A loon he is that will not sing. Oh, water hot is a noble thing. Oh, sweet is the sound of falling rain, and the brook that leaps from hill to plain. But better than rain or rippling streams is water hot that smokes and steams. Oh, water cold we may pour at need down a thirsty throat and be glad indeed. But better is beer if drink we lack, and hot water poured down the back. Oh, water is fair that leaps on high, in a fountain white beneath the sky. But never did fountain sound so sweet as splashing hot water on my feet." There was a terrific splash and a shout of "Whoa!" from Frodo. It appeared that a lot of Pippin's bath had imitated a fountain and leaped on high. Mary went to the door. "What about supper and beer in the throat?" he called. Frodo came out, drawing his hair. "There is so much water in the air that I'm coming into the kitchen to finish," he said. "Locks," said Mary, looking in. The stone floor was swimming. "You ought to mop all that up before you get anything to eat, Peregrine," he said. "Hurry up, or we shan't wait for you." They had supper in the kitchen on a table near the fire. I suppose you three won't want mushrooms again, said Fredgar without much hope. Yes, we shall, cried Pippin. They're mine, said Frodo, given to me by Mrs. Maggot, a queen among farmers' wives. Take your greedy hands away, and I'll serve them. Hobbits have a passion for mushrooms, surpassing even the greediest likes of big people, a fact that which partly explains young Frodo's long expeditions to the renowned fields of the marsh, and the wrath of the injured Maggot. On this occasion, there was plenty for all, even according to Hobbit standards. There was also many other things to follow, and when they had finished, even Fatty Bulger heaved a sigh of content. They pushed back the table and drew chairs around the fire. We'll clear it up later, said Merry. Now, tell me all about it. I guess that you have been having adventures, which was not quite fair without me. I want a full account, and most of all, I want to know what was the matter with old Maggot, and why he spoke to me like that. He sounded almost as if he was scared, if that is possible. We have all been scared, said Pippin after a pause, in which Frodo stared at the fire and did not speak. You would have been too, if you had been chased for 2 days by black riders. And what are they? Black figures riding on black horses, answered Pippin. If Frodo won't talk, I will tell you the whole tale from the beginning. He then gave a full account of the journey from the time when they left Hobbiton. Sam gave various supporting nods and exclamations. Frodo remained silent. I should think you were making it all up, said Merry, if I had not seen that black shape on the landing stage and heard all the queer sound in Maggot's voice. What do you make of it all, Frodo? Cousin Frodo has been very close, said Pippin, but the time has come for him to open out. So far, we have been given nothing more to go on than Farmer Maggot's guess that has something to do with old Bilbo's treasure. That was only a guess, said Frodo hastily. Maggot does not know anything. Old Maggot is a shrewd fellow, said Merry. A lot goes on behind his round face that does not come out in his talk. I've heard that he used to go into the old forest at one time. He had the reputation of knowing a many good strange things. But you can at least tell us, Frodo, whether you think his guess is good or bad. I think, answered Frodo slowly, that it was a good guess, as far as it goes. There is a connection with Bilbo's old adventures, and the writers are looking, or perhaps one ought to say, searching for him or for me. I also fear, if you want to know, that there is no joke at all, and that I am not safe here or anywhere else. He looked round at the windows and walls as if he was afraid they would suddenly give way. The others looked at him in silence and exchanged meaning glances among themselves. It's coming out in a minute, whispered Pippin to Merry. Merry nodded. Well, said Frodo at last, sitting up and straightening his back as if he had made a decision. I can't keep it dark any longer. I've got something to tell you all, but I don't know how quite to begin. I think I could help, said Merry quietly, by telling you some of it myself. What do you mean? Said Frodo, looking at him anxiously. Just this, my old dear Frodo. You are miserable, because you don't know how to say goodbye. You meant to leave the Shire, of course, but danger has come on you sooner than you expected, and now you are making up your mind to go at once, and you don't want to. We are very sorry for you. Frodo opened his mouth and shut it again. His look of surprise was so comical they laughed. Dear old Frodo, said Pippin, did you really think you had thrown the dust in all our eyes? Have you not been nearly careful nor clever enough of that? You have obviously been planning to go and saying farewell to all of your haunts all this year since April. We have constantly heard you muttering, "Shall I ever look down into that valley again, I wonder," and things like that, and pretending that you had come to the end of your money, and actually selling your beloved Bag End to those Sackville Bagginses, and all those close talks with Gandalf. Good heavens, said Frodo. I thought I had been both careful and clever. I don't know what Gandalf would say. Is all the Shire discussing my departure, then? Oh, no, said Merry. Don't worry about that. The secret won't keep for long, of course, but at present it is. I think, only known to us conspirators. After all, you must remember that we know you well and are often with you. We can usually guess what you're thinking. I knew Bilbo too, to tell you the truth. I had been watching you rather closely since you left. I thought you would go after him sooner or later. Indeed, I expected you to go sooner, and lately we have been very anxious. We have been terrified that you might give us the slip and go off suddenly, all on your own like he did. Ever since this spring, we have kept our eyes open and had done a great deal of planning on our own account. You are not going to escape so easily. But I must go, said Frodo. It can't be helped, dear friends. It is wretched for all of us, but it is no use your trying to keep me. Since you have guessed so much, please help me, and do not hinder me. But I must go. Oh, I'm sorry. I just read that line. Jesus Christ. I need some water. Ah, there we go. You do not understand, said Pippin. You must go, and therefore we must too. Merry and I are coming with you. Sam is an excellent fellow, and would jump down a dragon's throat to save you, if he did not trip over his own feet. But you will need more than just one companion in your dangerous adventure. My dear and beloved hobbits, said Frodo, deeply moved. But I could not allow it. I decided that long ago, too. You speak of danger, but you do not understand. This is no treasure hunt. There in that journey, I am flying from deadly peril into deadly peril. Of course we understand, said Merry firmly. That is why we have decided to come. We know the ring is no laughing matter, but we are going to do our best to help you against the enemy. The ring, said Frodo, now completely amazed. Yes, the ring, said Merry. My dear old hobbit, you don't allow for the inquisitiveness of friends. I have known about the existence of the ring for years, before Bilbo went away, in fact. But since he obviously regarded it as a secret, I kept the knowledge in my head until we formed our conspiracy. I did not know Bilbo, of course, as well as I know you. I was too young, and he was also more careful. But he was not careful enough. If you want to know how I first found out, I will tell you. Go on, said Frodo faintly. It was the Sackville Bagginses that were his downfall, as you might expect. One day, a year before the party, I happened to be walking along the road when I saw Bilbo ahead. Suddenly, in the distance, the SBs appeared coming towards us. Bilbo slowed down, and then, hey, presto, he vanished. I was so startled that I hardly had the wits to hide myself in a more ordinary fashion. But I got through the hedge and walked along the field inside. I was peeping through the road after the SBs had passed and was looking straight at Bilbo when suddenly he reappeared. I caught a glint of gold as he put something back in his treasure pocket. After that, I kept my eyes open. In fact, I confess that I spied. But you must admit that it was very intriguing, and I was only in my teens. I must be the only one in the Shire, besides you, Frodo, that has ever seen the old fellow's secret book. You have read his book, cried Frodo. Good heavens above, is nothing safe? Not too safe, I should say, said Merry, but I have only had one rapid glance, and that was difficult to get. He never left the book about. I wonder what became of it. I should like another look. Have you got it, Frodo? No. It was not at Bag End. He must have taken it away. Well, as I was saying, Merry proceeded, I kept my knowledge to myself till this spring when things got serious. Then we formed our conspiracy, and as we were serious too, and meant business, we have not been too scrupulous. You're not a very easy nut to crack, and Gandalf is worse. But if you want to be introduced to our chief investigator, I can produce him. Where is he? Said Frodo, looking round, as if he expected a masked and sinister figure to come out of the cupboard. Step forward, Sam, said Merry, and Sam stood up with a face scarlet to the ears. Here's our collector of information, and he collected a lot, I can tell you, before he was finally caught, after which I may say he seemed to regard himself as on parole and dried up. Sam, cried Frodo, feeling that amazement that could go on no further, and quite unable to decide whether he felt angry, amused, relieved, or merely foolish. Yes, sir, said Sam, begging your pardon, sir. But I meant no wrong to you, Mr. Frodo, nor to Mr. Gandalf for that matter. He has some sense, mind you, and when you said go alone, he said no, take someone as you can trust. But it does not seem that I can trust anyone, said Frodo. Sam looked at him unhappily. It all depends on what you want, put in Merry. You can trust us to stick to you through thick and thin, to the bitter end, and you can trust us to keep any secret of yours closer than you keep it to yourself. But you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone, and go off without a word. We are your friends, Frodo. Anyway, there it is. We know most of what Gandalf has told you, and we know a great deal about the ring. We are horribly afraid, but we are coming with you, or following you like hounds. And, after all, sir, added Sam, you did odd to take elves' advice. Gildor said you should take them as was willing, and you can't deny it. I don't deny it, said Frodo, looking at Sam, who is now grinning. I don't deny it, but I will never believe you are sleeping again, whether you snore or not. I shall kick you hard to make sure. You are a set of deceitful scoundrels, he said, turning to the others. But, bless you, he laughed, getting up and waving his arms. I give in. I will take Gildor's advice. If the danger were not so dark, I should dance for joy. Even so, I cannot help feeling happy, happier than I ever have felt for a long time. I had dreaded this evening. Good. That's settled. 3 cheers for Captain Frodo and company, they shouted, and they danced around him. Merry and Pippin began a song which they had apparently got ready for the occasion. It was made on the model of the dwarf song that started Bilbo on his adventure long ago, and went to the same tune. Farewell we call to hearth and hall, though wind may blow and rain may fall. We must away ere break of day, far over wood and mountain tall, to Rivendell, where elves yet dwell, in glades beneath the misty fell. Through moor and waste we ride in haste, and whither then we cannot tell. With foes ahead, behind us dread, beneath the sky shall be our bed, until at last our toil be past, our journey done, our errand spent. We must away, we must away, we ride before the break of day. Very good, said Frodo. But in any case, there are a lot of things to do before we go to bed. Under a roof for tonight, at any rate. Oh, that was poetry, said Pippin. Do you really mean to start before the break of day? I don't know, answered Frodo. I fear those black riders, and I'm sure it is unsafe to stay in one place long, especially in a place to which it was known I was going. Also, Gildor advised me not to wait. But I should like very much to see Gandalf. I could see that even Gildor was disturbed when he heard about Gandalf had never appeared. It really depends on 2 things. How soon could the riders get to Bucklebury? And how soon could we get off? It will take a great deal of preparation. The answer to the second question, said Mary, is that we could get off in an hour. I have prepared practically everything. There are 6 ponies in a stable across the fields. Stores and tackle are all packed, except for a few extra clothes and the perishable food. Seems to have been a very efficient conspiracy, said Frodo. But what about the Black Riders? Would it be safe to wait 1 day for Gandalf? That all depends on what you think the Black Riders would do if they found you here, answered Mary. They could have reached here by now, of course, if they were not stopped at the North Gate, where the hedge runs down the riverbank, just north this side of the bridge. The gate guard would not let them through the night, though they might break through. Even in the daylight, they would try to keep them out, I think, at any rate until they got a message through the Master of Hall, where they would not like the look of the riders, and certainly be frightened of them. But, of course, Buckland cannot resist a determined attack for long, and it is possible that in the morning, even a Black Rider that rode up and asked for Mr. Baggins would be let through. It is pretty generally known that you are coming back to live at Cricket Hollow. Frodo sat for a while in thought. I have made up my mind, he said finally. I am starting tomorrow, as soon as it is light. But I am not going by road. It would be safer to wait here than that. If I go through the North Gate, my departure from Buckland will be known at once, instead of being secret for several days at least, as it might be. And, what is more, the bridge and the east road near the borders will certainly be watched, whether any rider gets into Buckland or not. We do not know how many there are, but there are at least 2, and possibly more. The only thing to do is to go off in a quite unexpected direction. But that could only mean going into the old forest, said Fredger, horrified. You can't be thinking of doing that. It's quite as dangerous as Black Riders. Not quite, said Mary. It sounds very desperate, but I believe Frodo is right. The only way of getting off without being followed at once. With luck, we might get a considerable start. But if you don't have any luck in the forest, objected Fredger, no one has ever had luck in there. You'll get lost. People don't go in there. Oh, yes, they do, said Mary. The Brandybucks go in, occasionally when the fit takes them. We have private entrance. Frodo went in once, long ago. We have been in several times, usually in daylight, of course, when the trees are sleepy and fairly quiet. Well, do as you think best, said Fredger. I am more afraid of the old forest than of anything I know about. The stories about it are a nightmare, but my vote hardly counts, as I am not going on the journey. I am still very glad someone is stopping behind who can still tell Gandalf what you have done, when he turns up, as I am sure he will be before long. Fond as he was of Frodo, Fatty Bolger had no desire to leave the Shire, nor to see what lay outside of it. His family came from East Farthing, from Bugford in the bridge fields, in fact, but he had never been over the Brandywine Bridge. His task, according to the original plans of his conspirators, was to stay behind and deal with the inquisitive folk, and to keep as long as possible the presence that Mr. Baggins was still living in Cricket Hollow. He had even brought along some old clothes of Frodo's to help him in playing the part. They little thought of how dangerous that part might prove. Excellent, said Frodo, when he understood the plan. We could not have left any messages behind for Gandalf otherwise. I don't know whether these writers can read or not, of course, but I should not have dreaded to risk a written message in case they had got in and searched the house. But if Fatty is willing to hold the fort, and I can be sure of Gandalf knowing the way we have gone, that decides me. I'm going into the old forest first thing tomorrow. Well, that's that, said Pippin. On the whole, I would rather have our job than Fatty's, waiting here till Black Riders come. You wait till you are well inside the forest, said Fredger. You'll wish you were back here with me before this time tomorrow. It's no good arguing about it anymore, said Mary. We have got to tidy up and put the finishing touches to the packing before we all go to bed. I shall call you before the break of day. When at last he had got to bed, Frodo could not sleep for some time. His legs ached. He was glad that he was writing in the morning. Eventually, he fell into a vague dream in which he seemed to be looking out of a high window over a dark sea of tangled trees. Down below the roots, among there was the sound of creatures crawling and snuffling. He felt sure that they would smell him sooner or later. Then he heard a noise in the distance. At first he thought it was a great wind coming over the leaves of the forest. Then he knew that it was not leaves. It was the sound of the great sea far off. A sound he had never heard in waking life, though it had often troubled his dreams. Suddenly, he found he was out in the open. There were no trees at all. He was on a dark heath, and there was a strange salt smell in the air. Looking up, he saw before him a tall, white tower, standing alone on a high ridge. A great desire came over him to climb the tower and see the sea. He started to struggle up the ridge towards the tower, but suddenly a light came in the sky, and there was a noise of thunder. Chapter 6, The Old Forest. And I think we're going to leave off here at this chapter. A great ending place. I hope you all enjoyed this. I don't mean to disturb too much from the break of reading, but this will be the end of stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the little part that we got to. Oh, I need some water. My voice is very, very dry. Please, everyone, take care. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I will see you all tomorrow, as we will be playing games. Good night, everyone. Take care. Drink some water. Sky is sacrificing her voice for the cause. That is correct. Take care, everyone. Okay? Yes, I will see you tomorrow.